So SRAM has announced a new drivetrain, and guess what? It's got 12 gears. Before you type in the comments raging about this, there's a lot more to it than that. First of all, a big comment that SRAM's had is that their drivetrains, their one-by drivetrains, just don't have the gear range that their rivals do with doubles. For example, a Shimano 2x drivetrain with the newer 11 to 42 tooth cassette, that's got a gear range somewhere around sort of 518% to 524. The new SRAM drivetrain has just one ring up front, obviously. They've promised they're never going to make another front derailleur for mountain bikes, bold words. But their new drivetrain has a 10 to 50 tooth cassette. So that's obviously a 500% gear range. So that's actually very, very similar. That said, getting the extra range isn't the main reason why SRAM has made this new drivetrain. A lot of it's down to improving the refinement of their current systems. The XX1 is around 4 years old now, and in that time they've made a lot of developments to sort of make it sort of work quieter and smoother. The first thing you should know is that there are actually two new drivetrains that are 12 speed. It's not XX11 or X01, it's going to be XX1 Eagle and X01 Eagle. Obviously, these being SRAM's two highest level group sets, the prices are fairly high too. For XX1 Eagle, you're going to need 1,173 British pounds or 1,417 US dollars. For X01 Eagle, that will set you back 1,005 British pounds or 1,193 US dollars. Of course, you can buy the individual components on their own, and that's actually slightly more expensive. So what are the differences between these two group sets? Well, SRAM are really going to push XX1 Eagle as a cross-country racers group set and X01 Eagle as the enduro racer or trail riders group set. There are actually fairly small weight differences between the two. Visually, they look pretty much identical apart from a very shiny gold titanium nitride finish on the XX1 cassette and chain. The main difference comes down to the all-new carbon chain set. SRAM realised that with their current chain set, they're using the same chain set for everything from top-level downhill racing to World Cup level cross-country racing. Doesn't really make much sense because the demands are really different. So they made the XX1 chain set as light as they could be, which involved, it's still made out of full carbon fibre, but it's instead of having a foam core, it's now actually hollow. That means that, say, in a downhill situation, if you were to hit it really hard, it wouldn't be quite as strong as the X01, but they feel that the weight saving is worth making here. XX1 Eagle has also got some carbon fibre bits and bobs to help drop a little bit of weight. That means that without a bottom bracket, XX1 Eagle weighs 1,456 grams. That's a claimed weight, whereas X01 Eagle weighs 1,502 grams, again without a bottom bracket. I know everyone's going to be talking about the fact that it's got 12 gears and it's got a bigger range, but a lot of the work that SRAM has done is actually very, very hard to notice, but it's made a real difference. For example, the new chain is now slightly thinner. And the main way they've achieved that is by having the pins absolutely flush. Sounds like a very simple thing to do. It's not. SRAM had to invest a huge amount of time and money, in fact kind of creating a new part of their factory in Portugal to make these chains. So the process of making a chain now has 31 separate steps to make a single little link, and then you need to put the entire thing together. The reason for that is that the way they've profiled the new pieces is much smoother, which means that it interacts better with the chainring and the cogs, so it shifts better, there's less wear. They claim quite impressive wear life for this. They say it's multiples of existing drivetrains, which aren't bad at the moment. The other thing that's really changed around the new group set is the chainring. If you look at the old tooth profile compared to the new one, you'll see huge amounts of changes. The new chainring teeth have very, very detailed profiles. They're much more chamfered, they're shaped differently. And the reason for that is that SRAM discovered with the old chainring, basically most of the load from the chain was held on the first two teeth. That meant that wear was obviously increased on those teeth, higher pressures. What the new chainring does is aim to spread that load around it more evenly, which means again the chainring will last longer, the chain will last longer. It also means smoother and quieter operation because it engages better with the chain and also releases it better. The thing that you're not going to like is that the only thing that's really common between the old XX1 and X01 and the new Eagle drivetrains is the XD driver body. The chains aren't interchangeable, the cassettes definitely aren't interchangeable. The chainring is backwards compatible, but you can't use an old XX1 chainring with the new chain. So basically, it's all new. I'm sure you'll let us know what you think about that in the comments. I only rode this drivetrain for 2 days again on a cross-country bike and an enduro bike. So these are just my initial impressions of how it rides. The first thing that's noticeable is that it's a lot quieter in operation. In terms of The noise from the chain ring, how it shifts, it's much quieter, and it also feels much smoother. The shifts are sort of like a bit more refined than the old XX1. They're not quite as sort of buttery smooth as, say, Shimano XT or XTR, but they're somewhere in the middle now. And that's really quite nice. It sort of goes up and down the block really well. I didn't find myself using that big 50-tooth cog that much, but when I did use it, it was actually really helpful to have it there. You could find yourself winching up really, really steep slopes for quite a long time. In fact, going back to riding my current SRAM 11-speed equipped bike, I didn't really miss it apart from on a really steep climb, and then I did. The rear derailleur has seen some changes too. Obviously, to cope with the increased amount of chain you need to fit around that big cog, the length of the cage has been increased. They've also increased the size of the lower jockey wheel. That's gone up from 12 teeth to 14 teeth, and that still uses the narrow wide X-Sync technology. Interestingly, the upper jockey wheel doesn't. They reckon that's sort of like a slightly smoother shifting, again with sort of like the higher capacity. The clutch has also been altered. From the outside it looks pretty similar. They've repositioned where the cage button is. That's sort of like slightly more out of the way, looks a bit neater, less likely to get damaged. It also uses a slightly higher clutch force in order to keep the longer chain under control. That's not actually too noticeable through the shifter, however. The really interesting thing about the Eagle drivetrains is what it's going to mean for bike manufacturers. So now there's no real reason to even consider putting a front mech mount on your bike. You can get a very wide range at the rear. This is obviously going to influence both how you design the bike, the length of the bike. It's also going to influence how you design your suspension, because obviously it's working around a fixed point with a wider range there. That's big implications for how you design. And also at some point, this technology is going to trickle down. It did with XX1. Again, that could have a real influence on beginners' bikes. It's much easier to understand sort of one simple shifter. And again, now you've actually got all that range to be able to get up really steep hills or pedal along the road. That's going to be brilliant for starters. And that might take a while to get there, but as we see with SRAM's NX, it's already at a fairly affordable price point now. So we're going to see what the future holds, but I'd say you're going to see an awful lot of Eagle on an awful lot of bikes over the coming year.